Welcome to Beyond Transcendence with Andrew. I'm your host, Andrew Wilson. On today's show, I bring on Bob Martin. Bob Martin has enjoyed an interesting life. A successful criminal trial lawyer, a meditation teacher, a professor, and a mindfulness coordinator at Elon University, who studied under a 72-generation master from a Shaolin temple, and married a Bible literist. He started writing his book as a Rosetta Stone and a love offering for his wife and him to discuss the nature of the universe. It has become a healing vehicle for many that present the teachings of Jesus in a broader light and interfaith. Please welcome Bob Martin. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Hey,
So glad to have you.
thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So tell me, what brought you to spirituality?
Well, that's a good question. The answer might be a little long. Let me see if I can give you what we used to call, in my day and age, the Reader's Digest version.
I'm very familiar with Reader's Digest.
There you go. So I grew up in a non-theist family. I don't want to call them atheists because I don't believe that they didn't have any beliefs. It's just that since both of my mom and my dad's parents and ancestors were wiped out by one group or another, they just came kind of to the conclusion that there really couldn't be a loving God. So the conversation just didn't take place in our house. And so I grew up like that. I think when I was 15 years old, I read a science fiction story by a fellow named Isaac Asimov called The Last Question. And in that, I learned about a principle called entropy, which is either the gradual running down of the universe or the physical law that says that things will fall into states of disorganization unless acted upon by an outside organizing force. And so I wondered, the universe seems like it's pretty well organized. I wonder what that outside organizing force is. And so I went and I asked my dad. He's Hungarian. He talked like Dracula. And so he says, silly question, Mike. Why are you asking such questions? And anyway, fast forward. I grow up. I become a lawyer. I work for the DA's office. We hit the mob for a lot of money on a federal task force. I leave the office. I go out into private practice, and the mob guys come and visit me, and they basically say, you hit us for a lot of money. You got to be pretty good to do that. So they wanted to send me clients. And so I started hanging out with these guys in Miami during the cocaine cowboy days. And I was going out to maybe a few too many glass and chrome discotheques and partying maybe a little too hard. And my life was kind of spiraling downward. And I was seeing a therapist, and the therapist was named George. And one day I came to a real crossroads. I had to make a decision whether I was going to go this way or I was going to go that way. And I said, George, what should I do? What should I do? So he reaches behind and he grabs a little bag and he takes out these 3 Chinese coins. And he starts shaking his hands, dropping them on the table and doing some math and making some lines on a piece of paper, and finally comes up with a number, and he opens up a book and he turns it to that chapter. And the title of the chapter is Retreat. So I cursed him out because I was paying him $65 to be a therapist an hour. And I stomped out and drove around Miami. And that word, it was just, seared into my consciousness. So I went to some of the things that I thought I was going to make $1 million with. I opened up the door and I said, it's over. That's it. I'm going to pull out. And I started to, as in the 12 steps, we would say, make amends. So I started to make amends, and it saved me, it saved my family, it saved my house. And shortly, a couple of weeks later, I went back and I asked George, what was that? And he goes, well, that was the I Ching, the classic book of changes. I said, what's that? He says, well, it's Taoist. And I said, what's that? And so I then found out that my therapist was a disciple and the English language editor for Master Watching Ni, a 72nd generation. I mean, just think of that, 72nd generation Taoist monk from the Shaolin Temple. And so I studied under George and Master Ni for 8 years. And I took to Taoism like a fish takes to water. It was like the operating manual that they should have given me when I was born of how to be a human being, right?
Yeah.
But it didn't ask me to believe in anything supernatural. And so it was easy for me to gromp onto this because I was so hungry. And in that way, my life was very typical. You start to hit bottom and you start looking for an answer, and then one comes along and, you grab a hold of it. And so I worked on it and I studied and I practiced, and it changed my life.
And how did it change your life? What abilities and gifts did you find you had once you started down in this journey?
I found out that there's a profound meaning to the term that we all kind of love of going with the flow. Everybody says, yeah, man, you gotta go with the flow, but there's a deeper meaning to that. And certainly you don't want to live life paddling upstream. And it's much easier to go downstream and go with the flow. But that doesn't mean that you can lay back and be mindless. You still have to watch for the rocks. You still have to navigate. You don't want to run ashore, using this metaphor. So it's a careful practice of understanding the flow itself. I mean, are we on calm waters or are we on white water? Is there rapids? Is there a waterfall coming up? I mean, you have to understand the flow, and then you have to learn to align yourself with that flow so that you could be acting efficiently and effectively. So in the process of learning this very new way of thinking about life, the Taoism teaches pretty much, you could almost say that Jesus was a Taoist monk, because his teachings are the same, like that country western song, always be humble and kind. So it changed me in that I went from being a mob lawyer to public service. I went from being interested in money to being interested in connection on many levels, being interested, finding my richness in being dedicated to something greater than myself. Those kinds of qualities, I would say, kind of mark the change.
When you meditate, what have you found spiritually? What has it helped you to achieve for enlightenment and peace?
So, I teach meditation in a variety of circumstances. When I teach it on the college campus, it's going to be very secular. When I teach it to certain other groups, it's secular. When I teach it in a church setting or in another spiritual setting, and I kind of am more free to talk about the spiritual connection. And since you asked me, I will. So I think that we are connected to what in Christianity we call the Holy Spirit, and in other, religions and it's referred to in other ways, but we have an internal connection to it, and the conditioning of life and all of the ups and downs that we go to, and the kind of concept of self that we're handed, by the rigors of life, it kind of covers over that connection, and we get separated from it, and we start to think that the product of our conditioning or our thoughts is our identity. And that's a very small place to be. It's not a, when I say small, I don't mean in a critical way. I just means there's so much more. There's such much bigger self that we are. And when we are our thoughts, we're not really connected to the creator of our thoughts. When we meditate, we learn to step out of our thoughts and watch our thoughts. Initially, it's nothing more than noticing when our mind wanders. It's just, that's the first practice. Just notice when your mind wanders. And as you notice when your mind wanders, you start to get more familiar with your mind. And then you start noticing that you're watching your mind. And when you arrive to that point, and it doesn't take long to get there, when you start noticing that you can actually watch your mind, you start to reconnect to, again, secular, we would say the observer. We would call it metacognition from a scientific point of view. I personally prefer to call it your soul. And it is your soul that gets to have the thoughts. They get filtered through the conditioning. And as you watch it, you can sort of notice the effect that the conditioning has on the expression of your soul. And without resisting it, because whatever you resist persists, without resisting it, just noticing it and watching it, I kind of think of it sometimes as it's kind of like the conditioning is like a little bratty kid who wants to bother you all the time and have it his way. And if you resist it and you struggle against it, it gets that energy and it gets that strength and it stays there. But if you just watch it, and allow it to be, it's almost as if it gets bored and leaves you alone. And so little by little, that conditioning just seems to slowly evaporate, and you become more and more connected with this incredibly creative, loving, wonderful part of you that we can call our soul.
So how is Taoism and Christianity similar?
So they both teach the same values. For example, Lao Tzu, if he talks about leadership, says that you shouldn't push it down anybody's throat, but you should go where you're called. And when your work is done, you should step down. So as we study the life of Jesus, we know that he went where he was called. And he taught by attraction, not by persuasion. And when his work was done, he stepped down, he ascended, according to biblical scripture. So the example of Jesus is very similar to what Lao Tzu would advise a leader to be like.
That's very profound and amazing. So what lessons can you provide my honest audience for life lessons?
Well, first of all, just become aware of the fact that you're not your thoughts. That's that once we can see that we're not our thoughts, then we know that something happens and all of a sudden we find that we're upset. Our emotions have taken hold of us. But if we can step back just a moment and say, I wonder what the thought was that I had when that something happened. Let me give an example. Let's say that it just really bums you out when you see somebody walking around with their pants halfway down their butt and their underwear showing. It just, that's just something that bums me out. I don't like it, right? So you see it, and all of a sudden you get all these quick judgments and you're left not liking that person. The emotion is, I don't like that person. Now, if I can step back for a moment and think, what were the thoughts that I had that left me with the emotion and the feeling that I don't like this person, then I'm beginning to watch my thoughts. It gives me an opportunity to evaluate, were those helpful thoughts? Did they leave me in a place where I felt better, that I felt happy? Can I tell you a quick story?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I used to have a game with my son when he was in his teens, late teens. And the game was whenever something happens, whatever the first thing that you want to say, you say, then the other person can challenge it. And then you can start going back and forth, coming up with alternative truths. So that was the game. So we go to an Applebee's, and the waitress comes up and she's going, oh, I'm going to be your waitress for tonight, and I'm going to take good care of you, and anything you want, you can. And she walks away, and my son goes, boy, she was really bucking for a tip. So you see, that was the first thought that he had, and it became his reality. It was his truth. So, pardon me for what I'm about to say, but this is how the conversation went. So I said to him, well, yeah, but, maybe she got some last night, And he said, oh, okay, so game on, huh? I said, yeah, game on. So he goes, maybe her parents just gave her a new car. Or, so I said, maybe a guy that she wanted to date finally called her up. So we're going through all these alternative possible reasons why she could have been the way that she was. And, if any one of those came up first in our thinking, it would have been our truth. So I finally said, no, I know what it is. She just thinks I'm incredibly handsome. So he goes, yeah, well, and I go, nope, time out, game over. I'm going with that one. That's going to be my truth. So from that moment on, I just went with my truth that she thought I was incredibly handsome. She got a big tip. Everybody was really happy through the whole meal. We treated her great. She treated us great. Everybody went out. I was happy. This worked for me. That particular truth worked for me. Now, I don't know what is true and what's not, and I don't know if she was really bucking for a tip or what wasn't. But the ability to kind of play with your thoughts and recognize that your truth may not be the truth. It's just the conditioning speaking. And when we have a chance to step back from that and look at it, just notice it, then we also have the access to think about, whether it's helpful or not. And maybe we'll choose a different truth the next time, or the next time, or the next time. So that can change your life. Another thing that I would say is that the way our brain is constructed, our right prefrontal cortex, this part of our brain right here, it holds your fight, flight response, your stress response. Whenever you see something that you feel is dangerous, adrenaline drops into your body, cortisol goes into your body, heart rate goes up, all these bad effects of stress. Because, evolutionarily, we were trained, we grew up to be constantly scanning our environment for dangers. And so we continue to do that. We haven't evolved out of the same brain that was hunter-gatherer for a million years. Science has shown that if there's more electrical activity on the right side of your brain, you will be pessimistic, cynical, fear-mongering, fearsome, and stressed. On the other hand, this is our rest and digest brain over here on this side, the left side. It's where our mind broadens and builds. We get creative, we're relaxed, and we literally see the world more broadly. Our peripheral vision literally increases. When it's imbalanced, like it is normally, because today's world gives us so much to stimulate the stress response, but it's not cobras and tigers, it's missed deadlines and things like that is stimulating us all the time. So there's so much of it that this side tends to have a lot of electrical activity. We need to do something to intentionally balance our brain. So that could be jogging. It could be doing crossword puzzles. It could be hugging. It could be so many different things that you do on a regular basis consistently to build up that electrical activity in the left side of the brain. And meditation happens to be one of the more effective ways of doing that.
Yeah.
But, find some practice that gives you joy. Go to a mountaintop and watch a sunset and allow yourself to feel the beauty and the awe. This is almost the positive answer to PTSD, the sense of awe. So walk in the forest, smell the fresh cut grass. These things are all stimulating your brain and stimulating your neurons, and neurons that fire together, wire together, and then they form neural pathways, and they make it easier and easier to feel the things that make you happy. So you can literally use your mind to rewire your brain physically to give you the thinking that you choose that you want to have. If that made any sense.
Totally. I'm a quantum healing hypnotherapist technique practitioner, so I'm fully aware of what the mind can do. I've seen a lot in my clients and how their past lives come to this life, and they bring on like their illnesses or their discomfort, and through hypnotherapy and diving into the subconscious, we are able to heal that part of their body. I just facilitate it. They do all the healing, but I love meditation. I meditate every day. That's how I got through my loss with my mother, because my mother was a tragic loss for me, and it took me forever to understand that my trauma from my childhood followed me to my adulthood. So I went and I learned to heal my inner child through meditation and forgiveness. Forgiveness is my biggest thing, and I've learned that my motto is fear is our strongest opponent, and what we fear dictates our lives. And with fear, we've allowed ourselves the right side of the brain to be more active, because there's a lot of fear mongering that goes on with your workplace, your friendships, your relationships, your school, everything. It's fear based. And once you learn to get away from fear, you feel like a totally different person. And for me, I'm a soul having a human experience, not a human having a soul experience. So that's
get you, yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I've been learning. And doing the podcast, I've got to meet so many wonderful people like yourself and other people that have brought wonderful gifts and knowledge. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And thank you for what you're doing, because without the platform that you provide, and it's not easy to do a podcast. I mean, between arranging for the guests and getting all the technical stuff together, it's a lot of work, and it's a work of love. And I thank you for providing a platform that reaches out to people and gets this healing information out from so many different sources. So thank you for that.
You're very welcome. What can you tell us about your book? I see it behind you there, a new book. So can you tell my audience about your lovely book that you wrote?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I grew up as, my first introduction to any kind of systemic system of virtue was Taoism. And when I came to North Carolina, there are not a lot of Taoists here or anywhere. And so I started going to Buddhist temples. That's when I started meditating, because Taoism is really more contemplative than meditative. And eventually became trained, but wound up marrying a Southern Baptist Bible literalist who actually believes in all of the Bible stories as historical fact, and that you don't go to heaven unless you're saved and the like. And matter of fact, one time she was going off to church, she was all sad, and I said, "Why are you so sad, honey?" And she said, "I love you so much, and I just hate it that you're not going to go to heaven with me." So I told her that I hated it. She wasn't going to be reincarnated with me. She slapped me. But I'd ask her from time to time, what was the lesson in church? And when she got past the sin and some of the fire and brimstone stuff, and the exclusivity stuff that turn a lot of people off from religion. And she told me what, some of the lesson was. I think, well, that's not any different than what Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching about this, that, and the other thing. So I would go look it up in the Tao Te Ching, and I say, yeah, this is. So then I said, well, I wonder what the Bible says about that. So thank you, Google. I could go, what does the Bible say about humility? Or what does the Bible say about washing feet? Or what does the Bible say about the beginning of the universe? And I would find that there always was something that was there that was right on point every single time. So then the only trick was to take the kind of cadence and rhyme and feel of the Tao Te Ching and see if I could reimagine it with Christian terms so that it kind of sounded similarly, but of course instead of the Tao we would substitute God or the Lord or heaven. And it was a little difficult to move from a non-deistic theology to a very God-oriented theology, but it's okay. You can do that. You had to take a little liberty. But I would start to take one of the chapters and do the whole chapter and then read it to her. And all of a sudden, we had a Rosetta Stone. I thought that the stuff she believed in was just inherently completely unbelievable, and she thought the stuff I believed in was just weird. But with this way of looking at it, she began to understand me, and I began to be able to speak into her listening. So piece by piece, chapter by chapter, I did it. And when I finished the book, a traditional publisher, Innovative Inc., picked it up and they published it. And so I'm so excited about that. The nicest thing is now, I get letters and emails from people who have purchased the book, and most of them are people that had been turned away from traditional religion because it didn't coincide with their science. It was exclusive, and they couldn't understand how somebody in Asia who had never heard of Jesus Christ could be condemned to burn in hell forever. It just didn't sit right with them. And so what they had done is turned their back and kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater, and the teachings of this wonderful wisdom teacher, Jesus Christ, was lost to them. And they were mowing their lawns on Sunday and kind of got to the place where I had grown up without North Star. And so this was a way that they could go back and re-engage their relationship with the divine without having the trappings of organized religion. And it's meant a lot to a lot of folks.
When writing that book, what did it teach about yourself? What did you learn from yourself from writing that book?
That even if I put off doing hard things, that I will come back to it, and that I do have the discipline to do it. I like so many other folks, I suffered deeply from imposter syndrome. I just don't believe that anything that people say that I'm knowledgeable with, it's just that I fooled them. I fooled the law school into accepting me. I fooled the bar association into licensing me. I fooled them all. So it did let me say, I can take on a big project and I can complete it, which was a big thing for me. I'm sure there's a lot of other little details and stuff and the like, but it was 4 years. And it was fits and starts and the like, but I always went back.
Well, good for you for doing it. I'm sure you've touched a lot of hearts, and this has been a wonderful conversation, Bob, and I'm so grateful to have met you. and I'm thankful for your wisdom. And what do you have a message for my audience before we send off?
Yeah, get yourself a dog or a cat. You know, have a pet. You know, have. Yeah, I don't mean to be. I'm sorry if that sounds facetious, but take a couple of minutes every day to really stop and think about. You probably in the morning. I'll tell you what I do that makes a difference for me. My wife gave me this statement. This is the day the Lord has made. Be happy and be joyful in it. And I started taking my dogs out to this little field nearby where they run around in the morning before the sun rises. And I'd watch the sun come up and I would say that. And over time, I would amend it and change it. And it became my own personal moment, my own personal day. And what it has come to now is that I remind myself that I'm trading a day of my life for this day. Excuse me. But the day's important. It's important because I am trading a day of my life. And I'm 74 years old. And there's a lot of days, there's a lot more days behind me than there are in front of me. So my days are getting valuable. And when the day is over, it will be gone. And the only thing that will be left in it for me is whatever I left in it. So I want to make sure that at least sometime during that day, I leave something good in it. And that just helps me reshape the day. Take a few moments for yourself every day.
That's a beautiful message, Bob. I'm so thankful for your knowledge and wisdom. And I wish you nothing but the best. And God be with you, sir.
And God be with you.
Much love.
Much love.
And that's our show for today. I hope you understand the message that Bob was trying to express about how Taoism and Christianity are one and the same, and how religion can be one and the same, and how there is no difference wherever we come from our background spiritually. And spirituality is a non-judgmental form of practice and a way of life that I welcome to everyone who wants to experience this wonderful, energetic, empowering, beautiful experience with meditation, Taoism, Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga. Just to try any one of those will enlighten your mind and express the beautiful ideas that you have growing inside that wonderful, gorgeous brain of yours. I hope everyone has enjoyed this show, and I'm thankful and grateful for all my listeners. As I said before, I would love some feedback on how you like the show. Please email me at btwa2024@gmail.com. If not, if you could kindly leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I would be grateful. I am thankful for all of you, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Much love to all of you.